We had one heck of a comeback once again in the Stanley Cup Playoffs. Blues and Jets from Winnipeg down a goal with her down 2 with less than 2 minutes left to go. It is Kyle Connor perfetti. 1.6 ticks left to go. Latest game-tying goal in Game 7 history. And we would go into not one, but 2 overtimes. This was the 200th Game 7 in the Stanley Cup Playoffs. Just under 4 minutes left to go. Jets in the offensive zone. And Adam Lowry getting it past Jordan Bennington. 4-3 is your final in double overtime. The Jets advance to the second round for the 3rd time in franchise history. 5th President's Trophy winner to advance past the first round over the last 6 seasons. But as we know, winning and getting the President's Trophy doesn't always result in Stanley Cup success. So as you take a look at the Stanley Cup playoffs and the bracket, here's how it stands. 3 Canadian franchises are in the second round for the first time since 2004. That's the last season without the salary cap. And multiple Canadian teams have not advanced to the conference final since 1994, when the Canucks defeated the Maple Leafs in the Western Conference final. I set that all up because I got to bring our Canadian here, Alan May, to talk about sort of an updated bracket as we look ahead to the Stanley Cup final. And boy, we had some fantastic Game 7, some fantastic first rounds, and we're kind of giving you a second chance to see who's going to advance, who's going to get to the Stanley Cup final. Alan, you ready to go? You ready to rock?
I am ready to go. I got beat up on that on my first bracket, but that's the great thing about hockey is you can never really make bets or plans on who's going to be winning every round. There's so much parity in the league. And teams get hot near the end. You got teams that falter. Then you got teams that played at a high ceiling all season long. And all of a sudden, they can't level up that ceiling anymore. They can't raise the roof. So it's what I love about the NHL is that you just never know who is going to win. And that, to me, is the greatest thing about the sport.
Yeah, so I've heard that you had the Kings winning it all and then the Panthers out in the first round. So, again, a second chance, a mulligan, if you will. Here's a look at the West bracket. Take us through what you like and some of the highlights here moving forward.
Well, when I look at what's going on, with Dallas, the way they played, and they played some of the, in my opinion, the most exciting hockey in all of the playoffs, and in some of the periods where they came from behind and forced the games to go later. And what we saw in their Game 7 on Saturday was a team that was in attack mode. And they're doing this without 2 of their best players, Jason Robertson, and their defenseman, their best defenseman, Miro Heiskanen. So I look at Dallas, and I expect them to be able to compete so hard. Those other 2 players are skating. There's a good chance they're back this series. So I'm going to go with Dallas. I think Winnipeg, they showed some flaws, some holes in their game in that first series, and you've got a lot of question marks there. Dallas has excellent goaltending right now. They've got players that are coming back. So I'm going to go with Dallas in the matchup between Winnipeg and Dallas. And
then we have the Oilers and VGK. How do you see that all playing out as we saw in the bracket there?
Well, I didn't have the Oilers beating the Kings, and the reason why is I just didn't think they had enough roster depth. But one of the things you should never discount, and I should know this at all my years in the National Hockey League and even before that, is that when you have the 2 greatest players on the planet, and McDavid and Draisaitl, the things that they can do, the way that they can elevate their team, and it takes a lot of the pressure off the other guys, but the other players started to raise up their level of play as the playoffs went on. So I just look at those 2 guys, Draisaitl, McDavid, as being able to do something that the Vegas Golden Knights weren't able to score a lot of goals in the first round. They played uber defensive, but I think that plays into how those 2 guys play. So I'm going to go with Edmonton between them and Vegas because of the 2 big guns, and they've proven again that they cannot be stopped.
So you have Edmonton and Dallas in the conference final. If we get to the East bracket, again, you had mentioned fading the Panthers perhaps before the Stanley Cup playoffs here. Caps and Panthers on a collision course here. So set up the East bracket for us.
Well, the big thing with the Panthers is, them getting their players back that were injured. Then they had a big suspension. But all of a sudden, miraculously, once again, all their players are back on the ice. I didn't think they were actually going to be able to get back. And you look at the addition of Brad Marchand, who's in a more of a role player's role now. And I just look at those guys. I discounted them early. I didn't show them the respect that they needed. So I've got the Florida Panthers, the way they looked in the first round, they looked like they didn't miss a beat, even though they've got a lot of different players in their lineup. The mainstays are still there. They, once again, carried their team. And when you look what they're doing, I think Toronto, a team that their big guys aren't going to see this type of physicality that you're going to get from the Florida Panthers. So Matthews, Marner, they're going to get punished. Nylander, he's going to have guys sticking him and hitting him late and trying to slow him down. So I'm going to stick with the Panthers in this one because they just got that championship pedigree. They've got the confidence. And I heard Matthew Tkachuk on a radio show yesterday say, hey, technically we're still the champions. And you know what? I shouldn't have never discounted that, so I'm with the Panthers.
If we get to Caps and Canes, from an odds maker's perspective, Carolina is slightly favored, but I've heard from some people that it's a bad matchup for Carolina here. Why do you like Washington in this spot?
Well, I just think with Washington being such a big team that can take away the middle of the ice and the goaltending that they've had from Logan Thompson, who is spectacular against the Montreal Canadiens, there's question marks in net for the Carolina Hurricanes. One of the things that we do know about the Hurricanes is that they've got the same coach, the same style. They don't change a lot of their game every single night. The Capitals may have stumbled onto something at the end of the season. They were usually trying to play chess with the Hurricanes, but they decided to play checkers in their last matchup, and that meant they played hardcore physical hockey in front of their goaltender. They allowed him to see all of the pucks in the game, and then they went to the other end and they played super physical against the Carolina Hurricanes defensemen. They pounded them down, they grounded them down, and I think they may have stumbled onto a recipe for success in that revenge game that they had just last month.
So then what happens in the final according to your mulligan here, Alan? How do you see it all playing out?
Well, you got to go with McDavid and Draisaitl against the Florida Panthers, but I didn't see any letdown on the Florida Panthers. So right now, I'm still with them. They're healthy. They're going to get Ekblad back in another game or so. And when you look at that, the addition of Seth Jones at the lineup, that's another top-tier defenseman who's rather large, who can move the puck. And I looked at when you just take all of that into just the thought process of what it takes to win. They've got confidence. They've got belief. They know which styles they need to play. And so I'm just going to go with the Panthers. That's an easy, safe bet at this point. Them getting all their players back, and if everyone stays healthy, they should be able to roll all the way through.
You think roll, but what would be then the toughest test as you see them moving on in the bracket here? What would be the biggest challenge you think there, Alan?
Well, once again, just to get through the ground, the Craig Berube and his Toronto Maple Leafs play a way different style of hockey. They've got a lot of physical players. They've got a bigger defense. They've got his mindset on their roster. Then if they play Washington, Washington takes away the middle of the ice. They can play most styles of hockey. They've got Tom Wilson, who is an X factor that can X a couple of your players out of the playoffs. So, if you get Toronto playing a big brand of hockey, you got Capitals playing another big brand of hockey. The Capitals may be the biggest team in the league. They've got Tom Wilson. They've got Ovechkin. They've got Logan Thompson. They've got a lot of great things going their way. And I could easily be wrong about every series going into the next round. And I'm fine with that because that's the way the NHL playoffs work, and that's why it makes it so great.
So far, so good. And that's Alan May with his updated playoff predictions. Alan, certainly appreciate it. Again, when we take a look at the NHL slate, we get one game tonight out in Toronto. Then we shift back to sort of a 2 games a night scenario at 7 and 9:30 Eastern for those puck drops. Perfect for that multi-view over with the NBA playoffs, just like we were enjoying over the weekend.